In this video, I'm going to cover 3 really important things that you ought to know for your property business. The first one is alphabet shares. What are they? How do they work? Do they apply to you? Linked with that, freezer shares and growth shares. Okay, should you be thinking about them? When should you implement them? Are they right for you? The second one is business structure, sole trader, partnership, LLP or limited company. But really in that, what I'm going to talk about is a holding company structure to share with you whether that works for your property business. And the third one is cars. Should you have a company car? Should you have your own car? What should you be thinking about? How should you finance it? Watch this video and I'll cover all of that fantastic stuff for you. There are certain things you ought to be thinking about when you start your property business. But unfortunately, what happens is at that time, you probably aren't thinking about those things, and later on you realize you should have paid a bit more attention to them. So if you're new to property, this video is pretty much kind of near perfect for you in terms of thinking about those important things, mainly to do with tax. And if you're an existing property investor, you ought to know about these things so you can possibly change your business in light of the information I'm going to share with you. So the first one really is when you form a company, here I'm talking about a limited company, when you form a company, thinking about all the different shareholders and thinking about what types of shares to have. So generally speaking, let's say you've got husband and wife, they create a company and they kind of have shares 50-50 each. Now what normally happens is they'll form a brand new company and get ordinary shares. Husband gets 1, wife gets 1, or they get 2 each, 5 each, or 50 each. Let's just call it 50 each to keep it simple. As time goes on, say in 5 years' time, wife says, I need more money. Husband says, I need less money. So the wife says, I need to take a 50 grand dividend every single year, which she does. Put a wife here. Husband says, I don't need a dividend. The problem is, because they own shares 50-50 each, if she takes 50,000, he's going to take 50,000, and he may be in a very different tax bracket. Therefore, he might be paying extra tax where he doesn't need to, especially because he doesn't need the money. So we have a problem here. How can you potentially overcome that? And you can when you get to here, by the way, but better when you're forming the company, what husband and wife should do is create alphabet shares. So these could be A, B, C, D, all the way to Z. So you can create A class shares, and the husband gets 100% of the A class shares. Wife gets B class. Now, when you get to this particular stage here, wife says, I need £50,000, so she gets a dividend on the B class shares, and that's the only share class that gets a dividend. Therefore, husband doesn't need to have a dividend because he doesn't own the B class shares. So that's part of the benefit for having different classes of shares. Then you can restrict voting rights, rights on capital, rights on distribution, winding up. So if you've got employees, for example, you might want to give them some shares, but you might not want to give them voting rights, or you might not want to give them rights on exit in terms of getting some funds when you sell the company. Now let's move it one step further. Husband and wife form a company and they've got 2 children, and let's just say they're 18 and 20 years old, just to keep it really simple. So 2 little kids here, well they're not really kids, they're adults now, but 2 children. Let's just make them smaller here. So what husband and wife do is say, we'll give them some shares as well, and let's say C class and D class, and let's say one goes to son and one daughter, so they got son and daughter. And what they do is say, we're going to and let's say they've got some existing or one existing property, but going forward, and let's say they're into flipping properties, but going forward what they're going to do is flip more properties. So what they could do is freeze the value of the existing shares and say all future value goes to C and D class shares, and they can also freeze the value of A and B. So basically these have a fixed value, and let's say they're worth 50,000. Going forward, all the value created goes to C and D shares, and let's say in 5 years time these shares are worth 500 grand. So you can see what's happened here is all the value from the date that these shares were created goes into C and D class shares. So husband and wife now have reduced their exposure for inheritance tax, IHT, and the children get the value of that. Now the consequence of this to some extent, of course, is when the children get their hand on the money, what will they do with the money? That's a question that needs to be asked. If they've got these shares, what voting rights do they have? And because they've got that income, will they take over the company? So mom and dad don't have anything left over. If they get married and then the marriage doesn't work out, for example, will their spouse have some of this capital, which might be a concern for the parents? So we're in terms of losing income, losing control, and losing some of the assets or the value to a third party are some of the concerns people have. So these are some of the things you should be thinking about before you go into this particular arrangement. But it's quite neat in terms of passing over income and assets and value to your children at some point in the future. Now, if you can do this at the start, it's better because it'll be cheaper for you to set everything up. If you do this once you've got 2-3 million pounds plus value of your estate, it does not have to be 2-3 million, by the way, it could be £1 million of in your estate, then it's more costly for everything to set up and add new classes and new layers. So if you do it at the start, it's cheaper and better. If you do it later on, it'll cost you more money, but it is achievable. So that's the first thing. Think about alphabet shares, freeze the shares. When should you do them? Do they work for you? And by the way, I don't think the tax tail should wag the dog. It's about thinking about your situation, what you're looking to do. Is it right for you? Just because people out there are talking about it, it doesn't mean you should be doing it. What you need to be looking at your circumstances and think about what feels comfortable and right for you and your family. The first thing, alphabet shares. Number 2 is structure. So here, I'm not going to go into great detail because I've done other videos for you in terms of the different types of business structure, but thinking about, should you have a limited company, an LLP, should you be a sole trader, or should you have just a standard ordinary partnership? And it's going through the pros and cons of each single one and working out which works better for you. And by the way, if you're doing, let's say, service accommodation and deal sourcing and flipping and commercial conversions, for example, then there's no reason why you can't use some or all of these structures for the different parts of your property business. So it's not just always limited company is the best way forward. It's maybe you might have an LLP because you're doing property training, or you might have an LLP because you're doing service accommodation, and thinking about what are the benefits of an LLP which work better for this type of business compared to a limited company, sole trader, or a partnership. Like I said, I've got other videos here. You can search for them. They're kind of dotted around on this particular channel. But what I'm going to go into, which I think is quite important, alongside this particular structure, is at some point thinking about, okay, our business is becoming sophisticated, or it's going to become sophisticated. How do we manage that better and make it more streamlined? Well, one opportunity is to have a holding company, which, let's say, husband and wife situation again, and they both own 50% each of the shares in the holding company. The holding company then forms new SPVs, special purpose vehicles, every time you do a new project. Unless, for the purpose of this example here, say you've got a husband and wife doing commercial conversions. So they buy commercial property and then convert it into residential units. So SPV1 here, 2, 3, so on, so forth. Now, before I go further, let's say you only have one limited company right now and you formed a second one, so you're doing 2 commercial conversions. Can you add a holding company on top? Yes, you can. But that will cost you money in terms of advice from a tax person or an accountant like myself, and we do quite a bit of that. And then they might recommend to you that you should get clearance from HMRC. That depends how comfortable they are with the advice and whether they think it works or not. So whether or not you get clearance, you'll need written advice from an accountant and a tax advisor who can give you the exact steps and implement it for you, because you definitely can't do this at home, by the way. It's complicated stuff. The other option is, when you're starting off, doing it from day one. So forming the holding company first, then forming SPV1, and as you build your business, having more companies added on as you proceed. That is a cheaper way of doing it. This, adding that on top, is going to be more expensive in terms of advice and implementation. So it's thinking about which one works better for you. Now, a common question I get asked is, well, what happens when we finish this particular project? I've got £100,000 here. What do I do with the company? Well, if you're not going to use it anymore, the 100 grand transferred into HCO, and you can then dissolve this company here. That 100 grand sits up here now. That can go into here, 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 or any future company. So you can use the cash as you wish. When the dividend gets paid into a holding company, there's no tax to pay. So that's how you can utilize those funds. And when you've used these companies and you have no further use, because you've done a commercial conversion, for example, and you've sold all the units, you can just close them and move on. Or you can do another project in this company once you finish the first one. Totally up to you. Most people usually move on simply because what happens is they may have other partners involved in these companies, and they just want to close that off and move on, because they might have a different partner here or a different investor, so they just want to keep it all nice, clean and tidy. But nothing stops you using these companies again. But I'd say don't do more than one project in one company at any one time, because the whole thing of having an SPV and limited liability is you limit the risk of one particular project in that company. If you've got 2 projects, one goes wrong, one's working well, the one that goes wrong could bring down the other one, and that could be disaster for you. So one project in one company at any one time works better. So that's the second thing. And the third one for today is cars, because it's a popular one. Property investors and developers like cars. So do I, by the way, and that's fine. So you ought to be thinking about, if you have your own car, should you claim mileage, which is 45 pence per mile for the first 10,000 miles in any given tax year, 25 pence thereafter. Excuse the handwriting, but that's as good as it gets from my point of view, I'm afraid. So should I claim mileage? Should you have a company car? Here, by company, I'm saying a limited company. And it is thinking about, from these 2 options, which one works best for you. If you have a company car, then you obviously need to look at the benefit in kind rules and see how they work out. Usually expensive, depending on the CO2 emissions and the value of the car. The other option is, should I go electric? And the good news for you is company car tax is very low, so low tax could be a good way forward for you. So you can do that. Something else you ought to be thinking about is, okay, I've got a limited company, but I'm also now going to go into, say, service accommodation, or I'm going to have a management company. So you could possibly form an LLP once this moves over here, or a partnership, or a sole trader. Put ST here, yeah, sole trader. And then that particular vehicle owns the car. At the end of the year, you work out the cost for the car in terms of how much it costs you in terms of running the car, maintenance, insurance, wear and tear, and if it's on finance, interest costs, and you work out how much the car costs you a year. Let's say it's costing you £10,000 a year. You work out how much of the journeys you do for private purposes. In this particular case, 25% of the journeys are private, 75% business. So £2,500 you don't claim. The £7,500 you claim through this particular vehicle as a business expense. So that's that there. Now something that you might come across or think about is, well, I've got a company car parked on the work premises. It's going to be a pool car. Nobody ever uses it for personal purposes. Well, in that case, there's no benefit in kind tax to pay. But is that really the situation? If it is, fine. If you're going to take it home or you're going to have personal use, then you'll have to pay benefit in kind tax. So unless you say it really is parked on the premises and you keep a detailed mileage log and it's a pool car and all staff members have access to it, then it's fine. But generally speaking, in property, unless it's a really big property business, more often than not, the directors usually take the cars home, so that probably isn't going to work. So it's about doing this calculation and seeing which one works better for me. I have an old car, should I carry on with that? Or I want a new car, do I pay for it myself and claim mileage? Or should I get the company to pay the benefit in kind tax, which could be high? Or should I get an electric car so the tax is lower? Or should I have an LLP partnership or a sole trader and then work out how much I'm using for private journeys, how much for business journeys, and what's the net impact? So those are the things you want to be thinking about. Then you can think about, okay, should I do a contract hire car? Should I buy it outright in cash? Should I get it on a HP? Should I do a PCP with a balloon payment? Again, there's no one size fits all. Different dealerships offer different deals. Let me give you an example. Met one of my accountant friends yesterday, bought a new Jaguar, list price £60,000, ex demo, so it'd been used as a demo car for 4 weeks, on for £35,000. Called up the garage, you got this car on, list price is £60,000, you've got £35,000 here, I think you've made a mistake. Even though he wants to buy the car, he was just being honest. They said, we haven't made a mistake. These cars aren't selling very well right now, so it's on the forecourt, take it for 35 grand. So he bought a £6,000 car, ex-demo, used for 6 weeks. So it might have been on sale for 50 grand maybe because it's an ex-demo. I don't know how much that would have been on sale for. But £35,000 just because of where the marketplace is right now. Got a fantastic deal. If you're getting that kind of deal, is it better to pay cash, or you could get finance for it as well, by the way, so you don't have to pay cash? Or should you then say, I'm not interested in having that car and I'm going to go and get a car on contract hire? So it's about thinking about what deals you get at any one time. Different dealerships offer different deals for a different type of product because they're trying to push something, or there's a particular bonuses being offered on a particular model or particular finance package. So explore all the opportunities and see which one works best for you. So these are the 3 common things that people ask me all the time. So I thought I'd put this video for you. If you like it, click like so I know it's the type of stuff you want. Also subscribe so you get notified regularly. And if you got any questions on Alphabet shares, freezer shares, holding companies, or company cars, put it in the comments box below and I'll happily answer your questions.